It's time for Recipe of the Day. This juicy beef and pork meatloaf has the perfect mix of rich beefy flavor and tender moist texture. It is the true classic done right. I'm going to say that I usually just use beef in my meatloaf just because it's simpler. And as you know, I'm often doing the 1 pound meatloaf recipe. That's just the right amount for us. And so when I'm doing that, then I'm just using a pound of ground beef, That's also true for my air fryer meatloaf recipe, which I love. I just go with the beef. It's one package and we're good to go. But if I'm trying to make that like classic real meatloaf that you have at like a diner, that kind of thing, then you want to go more than 1 pound because you want to do beef and pork. It's got this really hearty, beefy flavor from the beef, of course, and then all this incredible juiciness from the pork. Delicious. Okay, where do you start when making this recipe? You're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, as you know, whenever I'm doing anything with ground meat, I like to mix everything together except for the meat and the breadcrumbs, if there's breadcrumbs, everything else together first really well, so that then when I add the ground beef, everything else is thoroughly mixed and I'm just mixing that mixture through the meat, which means I don't have to work the meat as much. If you have the meat there and you kind of sprinkle your salt on top and sprinkle your seasonings on top, then you're mixing and you're like, wait, did that all get evenly distributed? And you do extra. This way it's all mixed first and it's more evenly distributed, okay? If you ever try this, just try it one time. You will totally get what I mean. So you're going to get a big bowl and you are putting 2 large eggs in there, crack them into the bowl, and you're adding a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of chili powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of onion powder, and half a teaspoon of black pepper to that, and then just whisk it all up till it's thoroughly mixed. Then you add your meat on top. 1 pound of ground beef. I use a lean ground beef, and then a pound of ground pork. And you add that in, and then you just mix it until the beef and pork look fairly well combined. And at that point, all that liquid seasoning mixture will also be worked through it. Okay, I'm just going to stop though and say that the recipe says you can use ground pork or Italian sausage meat, either mild or hot Italian sausage, okay? You can use either one. And I will say Italian sausage meat is delicious. You know it and I love it. But it does present a little bit of a problem here. And that is that not all Italian sausage meat is seasoned the same amount. And so you can't know for sure how much of the other seasonings you need if you're using the Italian sausage meat. So I have a little tip for you. It's very simple. What you're actually going to do is go back in time and put less of the salt for sure. And you could do less of the other seasonings if you want. So I say cut the salt by half. So you would do a half teaspoon instead of 1 teaspoon if you're using the Italian sausage meat. Okay. Now you're going to add your seasonings, add your meat, mix it all up. And then you're going to take a little piece of the meat, like a quarter size, less than a golf ball, not a whole golf ball full, just a little bit. And then you could either put that on a microwave safe plate into the microwave for 15 to 30 seconds until it's cooked through, no longer pink if you cut into it, or you could do what my mom does and get out a little frying pan, a little skillet, and cook it in there like you're doing a little sausage patty, okay? Now, when it's no longer pink inside, let it cool down a little bit so you can taste it, then taste it. How does it taste? Now, if you've done it in the microwave, it doesn't have the browning and the caramelization that we want from cooked meat. Don't worry about that. All you're trying to tell is it seasoned enough? Okay. Now, if it is delicious, you just stop there and you can proceed with the recipe. But if it's not, if you are like, you know what, that is just not salty enough, what you want to do is just sprinkle the extra seasonings over the top. And then we're going to add a half cup of breadcrumbs sprinkled over top as well. And then you're going to mix that through one more time. And at that point, you can add other seasonings as well. So if you decided that it needed a little more salt and a little more of the chili powder, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, you could add that at the same time as those breadcrumbs also. We're just trying to not overmix the meat. So we were going to have to add the breadcrumbs and mix them anyways. So that is when we're adding that seasoning. Okay. And yeah, that is just a really good way to test if your ground meat is seasoned enough. Anytime that you're winging it to make burgers or meatballs or meatloaf like this, you're just kind of like throwing everything in the bowl and not following a recipe. And then you're like, wait a minute, I want to make sure that tastes good. You can just microwave a little bit of that meat and give it a taste. Works like a charm. Okay. So now whether you've added more seasonings or not, like I said, you're adding a half cup of of breadcrumbs to that and giving that one last little mix. And then you are going to be baking this on a baking sheet, not in a loaf pan. And to me, this is just really important. I find that when I do meatloaf in a loaf pan, the fat comes out of the meat and kind of like pools around the meat in the loaf pan. And I would rather that fat just kind of like go away. So if you do it on a baking sheet, it's not going to stay there touching the meat the whole time. Okay. So what I do is get out a large baking sheet, line it with parchment paper or foil. That's just going to make cleanup easier. And then transfer your mixed meat onto the parchment paper, and you're going to shape it into a 4x9-inch loaf that's about 2 inches high. And I'll tell you that I actually do use a ruler for this. I have a kitchen ruler. It's a ruler that stays in my kitchen. It's plastic, easy to wash in like soapy water. And I have it in my drawer with all of my measuring cups. It's in there. And I do pull it out and just make sure that it's about 4x9 inches and 2 inches high. And that's just because it's going to be consistent for cooking. If I do it the same way all the time, it's going to take about the same amount of time to cook. And that's what I like. Okay. Okay. Then you're going to get a 1/4 cup of barbecue sauce and drizzle that over the top, and then brush it with a little brush all over the top, sides, ends, everywhere. And then that goes into the oven. I do use a probe thermometer with a digital reader that stays outside of the oven so I can monitor the temperature. I know for sure that it is done, but that is up to you if you want to use that or not. You could use an instant read thermometer or whatever you want to do. So it's going into the oven at the 350-degree Fahrenheit temperature. It's going to be about 40 to 45 minutes to get it to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not done yet, but when it gets to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, take it out of the oven, spread it with another 1/4 cup of barbecue sauce, and then put it back into the oven and increase the heat in the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to let it kind of brown a little bit on the outside in that last little bit of time, about 8 to 10 minutes more. You're taking it out when it gets to about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to take it out and you're going to let it rest on the pan for at least 10 minutes. It's going to rise up to that 165 degrees Fahrenheit in that time, and that is the safe temperature that you want, 165. And that resting time also makes it easier to slice. It stops all the juices from in there from bubbling around and being crazy, so that when you slice, it holds together better. I actually have a video on my site. It's on the 1-pound meatloaf recipe that has like some different meatloaf tips, and one of them shows what happens if you do not let the meatloaf rest. You try to slice it and it just falls apart. So definitely let it rest. It's going to be easier to slice. To that point, I will even say that when my parents had their deli years ago, my mom used to make these big meatloaves and then let them cool completely, like fridge cold, and they could actually put them on the meat slicer and do like fine slices of the meatloaf for sandwiches. Oh, that was the best. I loved those meatloaf sandwiches. Okay, that is it. The classic pork and beef meatloaf. So delicious. You're going to love this one so much. I will put the link to the recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is October 14th of 2025. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.